It's often been said that people will often say the most important thing last in a conversation or in a discussion. You'll have a talk with someone. Yeah, how's it going? Good. How's this? Good. Yeah, how's your mother? How's your kid? You know, you kind of deal with the small talk, and then, at some point, typically toward the end of the conversation, people really get into the serious stuff. I mean, this is a really interesting dynamic in the world of counseling. When I used to do more full-time counseling and therapy with people, you talk to them and how's it going, get an update, how you doing, how's your family, same kind of thing, and everything okay? Yeah, things are basically okay. Anything I can help you with? Well, no, things are basically going all right. Maybe you can give me a little advice here or there. Okay, good, thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Oh, by the way, they say on the way out the door, I'm thinking of leaving my wife and moving to Mexico. It's like, oh, that's nice. You waited till now to tell me that? I can't do anything about it. You're on your way out the door. People often would wait until the very end to share something that was so important, and I really needed to know. Well, the same kind of thing, I think, happened with Jesus, as we just read, because those were the last words of Jesus, and I believe they were the most important. The key, significant thing that Jesus wanted to leave with his disciples as he left this earth was for them to go and make disciples. Be and make disciples of Jesus. If you think about it, Jesus just didn't command this. He lived it. Think about his time on earth when he was with the disciples. He was like the first great multitasker, right? As he went about, he taught, he healed, he proved who he was through signs and wonders. He instructed the disciples. He prepared people for the coming salvation that would be made available through his death on the cross. And everything he did and everything he was using in his ministry had one primary purpose: to teach and disciple his disciples about what it was going to mean to follow him. Everything he did had that purpose, if you think about it. He never did anything just for the heck of it. Everything he did had one purpose in mind. I need to show these disciples something through this. And for me, this has really become the clarion call of my ministry on a personal level, and what I really believe the church is supposed to be. Everything I do as a pastor, everything I seek to do here as a pastor, and everything I believe we try to do as a church has this one central focus: to try to disciple people as to what it means to be a follower of Christ. We don't do anything frivolous here. Hey, let's just do this prayer meeting this day. Yeah, we got nothing else to do that day. No, we have a purpose behind it. Everything in the bulletin you see, all these activities, fall festivals, immigration meetings, all this kind of stuff has as its underlying foundation, we want to disciple people and help them to understand what it means to follow Jesus. And when we study the life of Jesus, we see there are 4 stages of discipleship that he brought the disciples through. And I want to give credit to a guy for this. This isn't anything brilliant I thought up. There's a great author and theologian called Bill Hull, and he was instrumental in my life and my ministry. This is his big thing, the ministry of Christ, of discipleship. And I had the opportunity to sit under him for 2 years and do some intensive discipleship training in how we take this stuff that Jesus did with these 12 and bring it 2,000 years into the future into what we're doing here. Because if we want to figure out what we're supposed to be doing here to make people better followers of Christ, I can't think of anything better than to say, well, let's go look at what Jesus did. Because he did it perfectly. He took 12 guys and turned them into a group that changed the world. So let's follow Jesus. So what I want to do today is take a look at these 4 stages that Jesus brought the disciples through. But I don't want this to just be like an academic lecture. or just like a head thing, okay? My purpose in doing this is twofold. One, as we go through these, I want you to identify where you are in the process. What stage are you at in discipleship? And I want to encourage you to do what you got to do to bump it up to the next level, okay? And secondly, I want you to look at these stages and think and see where and how you can be involved in bringing people through these stages. Because we do this together. I don't do this. I try to do it, but we need to do this as the church, okay? And as I said, I believe this is critically important because for me, if you want to sum up everything we've been talking about, what does it mean to be the people of God on the mission of God? I would say it's to be and make disciples of Christ. Okay? So you ready? Here we go. Stage one. Come and see. Let's take a look at the scripture verse. It's from John chapter 1, verses 38 and 39. And we lost our PowerPoint guy, so we'll have to take a look at it in the Bible, which we should probably do anyway. You got that, Pastor Wayne or Nick? That was a scary thought. There we go. John 1, 38, 39. Come and see. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." This is taking place very early in the ministry of Jesus. And as word began to filter out about this curious, strange new person, Jesus, people started getting interested in him. Who is this Jesus guy? You know, we kind of heard about him. John is out baptizing in his name out in the wilderness. But people are starting to get interested in Jesus. He has kind of a charisma about him that draws people to himself. And on this day in the wilderness, as a couple of disciples are out there where John is baptizing people in the name of this new curiosity, Jesus shows up. And John says, "Hey, there he is." And a couple of disciples go over to check him out. And, "Are you the guy, Jesus, we've kind of heard about?" And there's a little bit of an awkward exchange there. Like, you know, you talk to someone that seems kind of famous, you don't know what to say, so they kind of ask him this weird question like, "Hey, where are you staying?" You know, not knowing what else to say. And Jesus says, come and see. And that's an interesting phrase by Jesus. It's a very simple phrase, doesn't seem like anything deep and profound about it, but it really has a deep meaning. It means, one, you know, come and see where I'm staying, which we know for Jesus was going to be really nowhere, but everywhere at the same time. But there's a deeper meaning, and that is this is an invitation by Jesus. This is an invitation he's offering to these non-Christians, we would call today, to say, come and see. Come check me out, right? And as we read in the rest of verse 39, it says, they spent the day with him. Wouldn't that be wonderful? To spend the day with Jesus, just hanging out with him, talking with him, following him around a little, seeing who he is. Who's this guy like? What's he about? You know, is he really who he says he is? My guess is it's probably one of those days where the disciples don't remember every single word Jesus said, but there was something special about it because they got to spend a day with Jesus, you know. It kind of reminded me, I was trying to think of my first date with my wife way back when we met, and we went out, and it's like, I have no idea what she said. I have no clue what we talked about, but it was a special day. It was a wonderful day. There was something about that day drew me to her, and we felt connected on some level. It was probably that kind of a day for the disciples, a day they would never forget. And as I said a minute ago, while these words of Jesus to the disciples are not very deep or profound, they began the start of something in their lives that would change them forever, as my conversation with my wife did on that very first date. Little did I know that was going to change my life forever. And it's the same here with these disciples. And again, simply for Jesus, it's just an invitation to come, check me out. And the disciples are interested enough to do so, and they did. So there may be some here today that are at this stage of discipleship. You've heard about this guy Jesus. People have said things about him that have kind of stirred up a little curiosity in your mind. Perhaps you've come to church today to find out a little more about him. Who is this Jesus guy? What's he about? Like the disciples, you might have some questions. Like the disciples, you might have some doubts. You may also have some hurts and some fears deep down in your life somewhere that you're kind of hoping maybe this guy Jesus can help me with this. If he's who he says he is, if he's who people say he is, maybe there's something in this Jesus thing for me. So you're here, you're checking him out. You don't know much about him. To you, I would say, come and see. Come and see who this Jesus is. Come check him out. Come find out about him as much as you can. Study his life. Observe the lives of those here in the church who say they follow him. I can assure you that Jesus really is who he says he is. But you'll need to discover that on your own. So for this first stage, I would say to you, come and see. Come and see who Jesus is. Come spend a little time with him. The second phase that we see in the ministry of Jesus is come and follow me. We get that from Mark 1:16 through 18. As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him. We know from verse 14, right before this, that it says this took place after John was imprisoned. So this would have been about 4 months after that first encounter, when the disciples first met Jesus. And as we've said, for 4 months now, they've had the chance to check Jesus out. They've walked around with him. They've talked with him. They've examined him a little. They've investigated a little bit about him. We know from Scripture that they've seen him change water into wine at a wedding. They've seen him challenge the religious establishment at times. They've seen him heal the blind and sick. They've had time to think it over, weigh the evidence. And when Jesus comes back now 4 months later and says, now come, follow me, they respond by dropping everything and they follow him. Like the first phase, Jesus' words here are rather simple, aren't they? Come, follow me, right? But this time it comes with a responsibility. I'll make you fishers of men. Jesus is turning a simple invitation now into a little higher level responsibility. This would mean turning from their old ways of doing things. These are fishermen. You know, they've fished their whole life. They know how to fish for fish. But Jesus makes this very interesting play on words and says, now I'm going to make you fishers of men. And they're thinking, this is going to be radically different. My life is going to change. I know how to fish for fish. What does it mean to fish for men? This is very different, right? This was going to be a whole different kind of a life for them. A life that was radically different than anything they had ever experienced. It was a life where they would follow Jesus. To turn from following the ways of the world. To turn from their past, their friends, their other influences, and just follow Jesus. Today we would call these people born again. These are people who have made a decision to drop everything, to drop their old ways of life, and follow the Master. people who have weighed the evidence. They've checked them out. They've investigated it. They've read Scripture. Maybe they've read some books about him, and they've come to the point where they understand who Jesus is, and they want to follow him. You know, these early disciples were a bit disillusioned with the religious establishment of their day. These were Jewish men, but in the reading of their life, you don't get the sense these were deeply religious Jews. The religious establishment of their day was kind of heavy-handed, we know, governed by the Pharisees and Sadducees and those kinds of people, and it was based on trying to look good and act good, but it had kind of this underlying core of hypocrisy that people couldn't deal with. And we get the sense that the disciples wanted something different. They were open to something different. And when they had the opportunity to check out Jesus for a while, they said, I think this is it. This is what we're looking for, right? The disciples found it in Jesus. And many people today are in the same boat. They've gone out. They've tasted what the world had to offer. Maybe they've explored and examined other different religious systems and other kinds of philosophies. And when they do that, they still come away feeling like there's just something not there. You know, I want something more. I want something more than what this has to offer. Perhaps they know on some level that their lives aren't quite right. They may feel a little disconnected from this God that they sort of have a sense of. They have a vague sense that if there is a God, he probably doesn't really like the way I'm living my life. There are things in my life that aren't good. And along comes Jesus, who simply says, follow me, right? Me. Jesus is making this personal. I don't want you to follow a religious system. I don't want you to follow a philosophy of thinking. I'm offering an opportunity to follow me, a person. This is a relationship that Jesus is offering, which is different than every other religious and way of thinking that there is in the world. Only Jesus, only Christianity offers a relationship with a person, Jesus. And that relationship is based on love and forgiveness. And he proves it by dying for us, by taking the penalty for our sins upon himself, so that we can be freed and liberated from the oppression and tyranny of sin. Is that the kind of life that you're looking for today? Are you searching for a life where you can experience meaning and purpose in your life, where you can actually experience joy and peace, and you can be freed from the oppression of sin and worry? If so, Jesus says, come, follow me. Have a relationship with me. Have a relationship with a real person. And I'll give you a reason to wake up every morning and get out of bed. Come, follow me. We'll talk more about that in a second. The third phase that Jesus brings the disciples to is come and be with me. And this is from Mark 3:13-15, where we read, Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12, designating them apostles, that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. They've checked Jesus out. They've made a decision to follow him. And now Jesus says, we're going to serve and work together. Okay? The disciples have now been called into a deeper level of involvement for Jesus. He's separated them out. He's called them up to a mountain. And he says, now you're going to see what it means to be those fishers of men, I explained way back in the last phase. This is the phase where the mission and that kind of vision that Jesus called them to becomes a reality. It kind of reminds me of my teenage years or younger when I got interested in basketball. And it was something that I kind of was interested in, and like the disciples with Jesus, I kind of checked it out and I looked into it and I kind of liked it and I thought it was something I'd give a try. So I went out and I tried out for the high school team. I thought I'd give it a whirl, and the day came when the coach said, I'm going to choose you. I want you to be a part of my team. And I said, wow, isn't that great? I've been invited to be a part of the basketball team. And it was such a great and glorious day, and you walk around the halls of school and like, yeah, I'm on the team. I got picked for the team. You know, you didn't, I did. I'm on the basketball team and you're not. Ha, 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 right? Well, then that first day of practice came, and all of a sudden, things got serious. All the fun and glory of being on the basketball team got replaced with hours and hours of laps around the gym, wind sprints, running them up and down the court constantly, going through hours and hours of drills that pushed me to the very limits of my endurance, and then sitting in hours and hours of more time watching films and watching games and trying to learn how to play better and how to be better, and then having to spend all of my time every day after school, every weekend, morning, noon, and night, with this group of guys that I was supposed to bond together with to be as a team. That was difficult. And all of a sudden, this call to be on the basketball team got real serious. And it involved a lot of work if I was going to be a part of that group. Well, that's what it's kind of like to be with Jesus in this phase of discipleship. You know, the main difference between someone says, I'm a follower of Christ, and one who is with him is conviction. You know, anyone can say, oh, I'm a basketball player, but the difference is, you know, have you really invested the time and the training to understand the game deeply? And for a disciple of Christ, it's the same thing. Anyone can say they're a Christian, and if you turn to Jesus in faith, you are. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But the real test of a disciple comes when we get down to the real work of being with him. Jesus said, I want you to be with me. Don't just follow me around. Be with me. And Jesus spent the next 20 months with these 12 men, grounding them in the Word, teaching them how to pray, binding them together in fellowship, teaching them the tools of evangelism and witnessing. He deepened their convictions. He supervised their training. He sent them out in twos and said, now come back. Let me know how you did. Let's talk about it. Yeah, do this next time. Don't do that. You should have done it like this. You know, he's training them. He's going through drills and stuff with them because he knows that he's leaving soon. And they're going to need to carry on the ministry without him. So he takes this ragtag band of misfits and he turns them into a lean ministry machine that would turn the world upside down. That's what it means to be with Jesus, to enter into that level of training and discipleship, to go beyond the mere formalities of Christianity, to realize that following Jesus means much more than just coming to church on Sundays and trying to read my Bible if I can every day. It means to sign on for the mission, to place yourself under the training and tutelage of someone else here in the church, to deepen your convictions about the faith. These are like the people in the parable of the seeds who, when that seed was planted in the soil, they sunk their roots deep down into the fertile nutrients that Jesus had to offer them. These are people that have taken root in the faith and have gone through what it's necessary to be a follower of Christ. It's easy to say, you know, I'm a Christian, but have I taken the steps necessary to be grounded in the essentials of the faith, to serve him in the church, and to disciple others? That's what it means to be with Jesus. And then lastly, we have the fourth stage, which is to remain in me. This is from John 15:7-8, where he says, if you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. You know, there comes a point in most people's lives where they're really forced to come to grips with who they are, or who they say they are, right? We think of the soldier out on the battlefield who looks across at the enemy lines that day and sees the enemy lining up. And it's like, am I really ready to defend my country? This is serious now, isn't it? All the training's done. I've done basic training. I've gone through all the stuff. Now here's the guy on the other side of the forest that has a gun pointing at me, right? Am I really ready for this? Or maybe some of you go and start a new job and you kind of go through the orientation, and that's nice, and you learn all about your job, but then that day comes where you're out on the floor for that first day, and it's like, am I ready to do this job that I may not particularly feel prepared for? Or I think of a mother who comes home from the hospital with that tiny, helpless little thing sitting in front of her that she has to care for now. And there's no nurses around to help anymore. And this child is totally dependent on her for its life. Am I ready to care for this child and raise them as a mother, right? For the disciples, that time came when Jesus left them. He wasn't with them anymore to train them, to walk them around and show them how to do things. They were on their own now. It was time to put into practice, to live out all that they had been trained to do. And what Jesus wants to know as he prepares for that moment here on his last night on earth is, will you remain in me? Will you remain in me? It's a very deep statement, one that not many people understand. To remain in Jesus means quite literally to be one with him, to be so intertwined with him, so fused with him in mind, deed, and thought that we're virtually indistinguishable. I don't even know if people realize that's available to you as a disciple, that you can be so one with Jesus that you think like he thinks, you act like he acts, your inclinations are his inclinations. This is a very deep and profound level of relationship and discipleship, and honestly, not many Christians get to this level of discipleship. Most people are just content to come to church, attend a few Bible studies, and try to help out where I can. But in a more deep, intense relationship, we remain with Jesus. And this is the kind of thing that leads people to do crazy things, like drop everything and go on to the mission field, or give up activities at home in the night to start a new ministry here in the church, to give up a Saturday to minister to people in the community, or even to willingly go to their death, as each of the disciples would do in their own lives. To remain in Jesus takes a serious commitment of our time and our money and our efforts. But as we do, we get this amazing blessing of being able to be just like Jesus is. When Jesus prayed to God in John 17, Father, let them be one with me as I am with you. Do you understand how deep that is? That we can be connected with Jesus on the same level that he's connected with his Father. This is an amazingly profound thought. But it's available to disciples of Christ. And what we see in them is that they bear much fruit. And their lives become um, factories where they reproduce more and more disciples through themselves. I heard of an illustration once that, you can take like a plain hunk of iron. I don't know how big, but the illustration just said a hunk of iron, right? It's probably worth about $5. Nowadays, with the price of metal, maybe it's worth $10, but a hunk of iron might be worth $5. But if that same iron is fashioned into a tool, maybe a hammer, you could sell it for $20, right? Because it's worth more. If you take that same piece of iron and make sewing needles out of it, it's actually worth $5,000. And if you take that same piece of iron and make little sensitive, delicate springs for fancy Swiss watches, it's actually worth $250,000, right? The secret is how it's used. And Jesus, our master fashioner, can transform the life of a simple human being into a highly valuable instrument for his kingdom. And Jesus' work with the disciples demonstrates this. Are you willing to let Jesus fashion you, mold you into something valuable for his kingdom, where you really make an impact for the kingdom and not just make it a part of your life? So to summarize these stages, have you come to see who Jesus is? Have you accepted his invitation to come, check me out, see what you think of me? And having done that, would you like to enter into a life of following him? Would you like to make him the Lord of your life? Would you like to cast aside the life that you've been living to enter into new relationship, a life with a real person as your Lord? I would be thrilled to talk to you about that today if you would like that. The close of the service today, please come see me, because I want to explain to you in more depth what it means to be a disciple, a follower, a born-again believer in Jesus Christ. And if you've done that, and if you've said, yeah, I did that in my life, I made that decision for Christ in my life, well, are you now ready to be with him? Are you now ready to enter into a program of discipleship, of training that is going to ground you in what it truly means to be a follower of Christ? To search out opportunities to serve and to disciple others and to grow in what it means to be a disciple of Christ. We have ministries here to help you with that. We have plenty of things. I got people that can disciple you. I can disciple you. We have Bible studies. We have prayer groups. That's what all this stuff is for, to help you be with Jesus. And as I've said before, we're even willing to do other things. If there's something you feel, for me to really grow in my faith, I would love for there to be this kind of a study or this kind of a ministry. Come tell me, speak to one of the elders. We want to do everything we can to help you be with Jesus. And lastly, are you ready to remain in him? Do you want to be in such union with Christ, such depth that you become one with him in purpose and deed? To serve him in even deeper ways in the kingdom. If you feel like you're ready for that level of depth of discipleship, come speak to me, because I'd like to talk to you about how to bring this down to the deepest level of your walk with Christ. To be a disciple of Jesus is what it's all about, I believe, as people who follow him. And it's really an act of devotion, if you think about it. And we have the opportunity to express our devotion to Jesus and to discipleship this morning as we observe the Lord's table.